Pompeo meeting Jaishankar. What's on the table for India and US? By Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will lock friendly horns with India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar on Tuesday, 25th June. Both ministers are battle-scarred veterans of friendly, productive, and sometimes bruising interactions between the two countries. Pompeo, a former attorney, state representative, and CIA director, will engage with his counterpart, Jaishankar, who is a former diplomat, ambassador to the US and China, and foreign secretary. 8 years older than Pompeo, Jaishankar brings unmatched brilliance and experience in equal measure to the negotiating table. A lot depends on the Pompeo-Jaishankar meeting. The duo is likely to resume deliberations at the G20 summit in Osaka later in June. Pompeo has tried to walk up the convergence of interest by saying in a major speech recently at the US-India Business Forum that both countries have an incredibly unique opportunity to move forward together for the good of both our peoples and the Indo-Pacific region and indeed the entire world. With a nod towards PM Modi's impressive election victory, Pompeo went on to say, "Modi hai to mumkin hai." India-US ties are going through a periodic and stressful phase. Unarguably, enormous strides have been made during the last 2 decades in deepening bilateral relations in the nuclear, trade, investment, defense, and many other sensitive sectors like cybersecurity and counter-terrorism. The upward trajectory in ties accelerated after the India-US nuclear deal in 2008. Since then, the US has emerged as India's largest trading partner in goods and services, a major investor and supplier of defense hardware. People-to-people ties have also seen an upward trajectory, with Indian students comprising the largest chunk of foreign students in the US and a thriving and affluent Indian origin community of over 3 million, adding to the growing links. American pressure on Pakistan on terrorism, denial of aid and defense hardware, support from the UNSC on the Pulwama terror attack, and the subsequent Indian airstrikes at Balakot, support for Pakistan's inclusion in the grey list in the FATF, have been viewed favorably by New Delhi. The US's pressure on Pakistan is not India-driven. US's agenda is to pursue military disengagement in Afghanistan. Pakistan has been cooperating in bringing the Taliban to the negotiating table, but Afghanistan is a tough nut to crack. The Trump regime has hinted at complete military withdrawal from Afghanistan. This will embolden Pakistan and Taliban to demand more concessions. Despite the reassuring rhetoric of the two countries being the largest democracies and PM Modi's personal overtures to Trump, bilateral ties have had their share of irritants on issues initiated after the Trump administration took office. Trump's maverick style masks the pursuit of American national interests, as articulated in the National Security Strategy document of December 2017. Though China and Russia were identified as revisionist powers, subsequent actions of the Trump administration were presaged by the doctrine that international relations were essentially a competitive domain and not a cooperative exercise. American friends and allies have also been buffeted by Trump's unpredictable implementation of the America First doctrine. Trump's flip-flops may be bewildering, but the American deep state exercises restraint from the background. Trump's recent comment on calling off airstrikes against Iran following the shooting down of an American spy drone by the Iranians is an indicator of the dynamics at work in the Washington Beltway. Trump may have realized the futility of a conflagration in the crucial oil supply sea lanes in the Strait of Hormuz. Any attack on Iran will spill over into Saudi Arabia and the UAE and devastate their economies and spark off a global energy crisis. India will be conveying its deep concern to Pompeo on any military misadventure against Iran. India's major energy supplies and economic interests will be impacted adversely in any conflict in the Gulf. Over 8 million Indians live and work in the Arab Gulf countries. Jaishankar and Pompeo will debate the sanctions on Iran, defense hardware procurement from Russia, withdrawal of GSP trade benefits, IPR issues, price controls on pharmaceuticals and medical devices, high Indian tariffs on American goods, and India's demand on data localization. The US has unofficially hinted at reduction of H-1B visas for Indian professionals in retaliation to India pushing the data localization issue. Russia has been India's long-standing defense partner for over 7 decades. Over 60% of India's defense hardware is still of Russian origin. Iran was a major oil supplier to India till the Americans decided not to give any waivers from unilateral sanctions imposed on Iran. India has reduced its imports of oil from Iran, and imports will drop to zero according to the Indian ambassador in Washington. Will India bow to the CAATSA sanctions threat renewed before Pompeo's visit by unnamed American officials? American sweeteners to supply the terminal high altitude area defense and Patriot air defense systems in lieu of the S-400 will be a talking point which may end in disagreement. As mitigating forces, India's proposals for the acquisition of additional American military hardware and buying more oil and gas from the US will be on the negotiating table. There are other trade issues involving Chinese companies as well. The United States has officially warned Indian companies not to deal with Huawei, specifically warning against supplying equipment of American origin to the Chinese company. This may well lead to Huawei being shut out of India's 5G rollout. India, however, remains concerned about China's growing footprint in India's neighborhood. Trump's tariff war on China and banning Huawei and other Chinese companies from doing business in American and other countries is another front which presents an opportunity for both China and India. China's opaque regulations to prevent Indian exports to China has led to a huge and unsustainable trade deficit. America's tariff war against China may open the Chinese market for India and other countries. Trump's tariff war against China is being quietly appreciated by many countries that have struggled with Chinese NTBs, while China has had no such impediments placed on its export by these countries. China's free run on maximizing exports and preventing imports may be reaching the final lap. China can seize the opportunity to meet India halfway in tackling the trade deficit. India isn't interested in any security architecture in Asia. However, in collaboration with the US and other powers that smacks of the containment of China, India will certainly cooperate with any major power that helps in managing its adversarial relations with China. Flexible alignment with major powers is likely to be the beacon guiding Indian foreign policy in the decades to come. India's concern with China is directly linked to the Indian national security, unresolved border, Chinese attempts to seek military bases in India's neighboring countries, and providing continued nuclear and missile technologies to Pakistan. On the Belt and Road Initiative, India has refused to cooperate, citing sovereignty issues relating to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Pompeo and Jaishankar will have a lot to discuss, and going by recent trends, there will be the resolution of certain issues, while others, like S-400 deal with Russia, is likely to get deadlocked if the US takes a rigid position. Threats of US sanctions are likely to be counterproductive. India lived with many sanctions after refusing to sign the NPT and after its nuclear tests in 1998. Today, India is a recognized nuclear weapons power outside the NPT. If the Indo-Pacific agenda has any future, it cannot be based on American unilateralism and threats of sanctions against India.